uncover the chilling tale of Jessie Carter, a brave single mother caught in a nightmarish scenario when her Uber ride turns into a harrowing escape from a notorious kidnapper where this story takes place. In the heart of a city swallowed by the long shadows of night, fear was in the air, as chilling as the cold breeze that whispered through empty streets. A killer prowled in the darkness, seeking his next prey. There were news reports every night speaking of disappearances, each victim a woman, each story a void of unanswered questions. The city was scared because of this scary pattern, which turned every news story into a sign of doom. Jessie Carter, a dedicated secretary, found herself drowning in the late hours at her office, working for a boss who cared only about himself. Her life was a balancing act of duties, managing endless paperwork by day, and caring for her spirited 5-year-old son and aging mother by night. The city's creeping fear was a distant echo in her busy life, until that fateful evening when she became part of the dreadful chorus. It was past midnight when Jessie finally shut down her computer. The office was eerily silent, emptied of its usual bustling life. Outside, the streets bathed in the cold glow of streetlights seemed different, more ominous. She shivered, not just from the cold, but from a creeping unease as she gathered her things to leave. Jessie's car, usually reliable, chose that night to betray her. With a sigh, she turned the key again, only to be met with the groans of a dead engine. A glance at her watch spiked her anxiety. She was late, much later than she had ever been. With her son and mother alone at home, worry gnawed at her. Resolving that nothing would keep her from getting home, Jessie went inside her car and pulled out her phone to order an Uber. The app buzzed to life, and within minutes, her ride was confirmed. The relief was immediate but fleeting. Within 5 minutes of waiting for her ride, a car pulled up, surprising Jessie with how fast her Uber came. She quickly got out of her vehicle and hurried into the passenger seat of a nondescript coupe that pulled up silently beside her. And being that Jessie was such in a hurry, she never looked at her phone to confirm and match the car that was supposed to come pick her up. The driver, a man with an unsettlingly benign smile, greeted her with a nod.
Rough night?
He asked as they pulled away.
Just tired.
Jessie replied, trying to mask her anxiety. She noticed in her peripheral vision the driver's eyes staring at her, lingering just a tad too long before focusing back on the road. As they drove, Jessie's sense of unease deepened. The route looked unfamiliar. Streetlights blurred past, casting long shadows that danced like specters fleeing the dawn. She leaned forward.
I think you've taken a wrong turn.
The driver's reply was a smile that didn't reach his eyes.
Shortcut,
he said. His voice, eerily calm, sent a shiver down her spine. Jessie fumbled with her phone, intending to check their route. As she did, a soft, almost imperceptible click sounded through the car. The doors locked. She tested her door gently. It was indeed locked, and the realization that the windows were bulletproof cemented a terrifying suspicion in her mind. Panic clawed at her chest as the car veered on the main road, rolling towards the dilapidated part of the city. The buildings here were hollowed out by time and neglect, standing like the skeletal remains of a forgotten war.
Please, I need to get home to my son,
Jessie pleaded, her voice cracking. The driver didn't respond, his face an emotionless mask. As he drove into the gaping maw of an abandoned warehouse, the car stopped, and the silence that followed was oppressive. He turned to her, his expression darkening.
get out.
He commanded. The coldness of the concrete floor seeped through Jessie's clothes as she was roughly dragged into a room and tied with coarse ropes. The driver left, his footsteps echoing back like the dull throbbing of a nightmare. Jessie struggled against her bindings, her mind racing. Fear for her family fueled her desperation. Remembering her old wrestling maneuvers from college, Jessie twisted and turned, her shoulder dislocating with a painful pop she had grown familiar with. Grimacing, she worked her arm free, then the rest of her bindings. Free, but not safe. She listened for the footsteps, her heart pounding wildly. The driver returned, his shadow falling across the floor before him. He entered the room, a bag of sinister tools in hand, only to find Jessie missing. His momentary confusion was all she needed. As he turned, Jessie sprang from behind the door, locking her arm around his neck in a chokehold honed by years of training. His weight was substantial, but panic lent her strength, and she held on until he slumped to the ground, unconscious. Trembling, Jessie used the ropes that had bound her to secure the driver. She dialed 911, her voice a mixture of fear and relief as she spoke to the dispatcher. Within minutes, the wail of sirens pierced the night and the warehouse was flooded with police. Handcuffs clicked as they secured the unconscious man. Officers swept through the building, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Jessie was escorted outside, the night air feeling like a balm. As she rode back in the back of a police car, the city seemed different again. Not a place of lurking shadows, but of homes and lights and life. Returning to her own home, the embrace of her son and the relieved tears of her mother were her salvation. That night, as they sat together, the television news flickered with images of the man Jessie had subdued.
Local woman survives kidnapper.
The headline read, and Jessie, holding her son a little tighter, realized that the night had changed, her in more ways than one. As her son fell asleep, curled up against her, the weight of what could have been pressed down on her heart. She had faced a terror that many had not survived. The city's fear had been a distant echo for Jessie until tonight. Now it was part of her story. Her mother, who had been watching her closely, reached over and squeezed her hand.
"You're brave, Jessie. Braver than you ever knew,"
she whispered. Jessie looked into her mother's eyes, seeing not just the fear that lingered, but a fierce pride. In the days that followed, Jessie's life took on a surreal quality. Detectives came and went, piecing together the profile of a predator who had haunted the city's streets for too long. The media clamored for her story, eager to showcase the courage of an ordinary woman who had fought back against the shadows. Jessie spoke to them not of heroics, but of survival and the will to return to her son and mother. The community rallied around her, their support a warm blanket against the chilling memories. They spoke of other victims, other families not so fortunate, and Jessie found a new purpose in their shared grief and resilience. She became an advocate for safety, her story a call to action, pushing for better security measures and support for those affected by violence. As the weeks turned into months, the city slowly transformed. The fear that had once cloaked the streets began to lift, replaced by a cautious hope. Jessie watched as neighborhoods organized, people reconnecting with a vigilance warmed by communal care. At home, Jessie's son grew familiar with his mother's newfound strength, seeing her not just as his protector, but as a hero to many. Jessie's experience had indeed changed her, deepening her roots in a community she had once thought of as merely the backdrop of her busy life. She understood now that every quiet act of living was a defiance against the darkness that sought to engulf it. One evening, as she tucked her son into bed, he looked up at her with wide, knowing eyes.
"Mommy, you're a superhero,"
he said with a child's earnestness. Jessie smiled, kissing his forehead.
No, honey, I'm just a mom, and that's more than enough.
Outside, the city hummed softly, its lights a testament to life's persistence. Jessie looked out the window, her reflection superimposed over the sprawling urban landscape, a symbol of ordinary strength, a beacon in the night. In the heart of a city that had once trembled, a woman named Jessie had turned fear into fortitude, her story a reminder that even in the deepest darkness, the human spirit fights fiercely for the light. Now, if you enjoyed this story, do me a favor and show me some love by subscribing to my channel and liking this video so I can continue bringing you more stories just like this. Until then, I'll see you on the next one.